He's just a kid, let him go! Those were the first words I shouted when I realized what was happening. My name is Mark, and I work as a clerk at the courthouse in our small town. I never thought I'd witness something like this, let alone be so close to it. It started on a Thursday evening. Judge Whitaker, a well-known man in the community, was heading to his car after a long day in court. I was a few steps behind him in the parking lot. It was already dark and the lot was almost empty. That's when they came out of nowhere, 3 men in ski masks. They grabbed the judge, forced a bag over his head, and shoved him into a van parked nearby. I froze for a moment, too shocked to move. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw him, a small, skinny black boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He had been sitting on the curb, fiddling with a beat-up backpack. I had noticed him earlier, but thought nothing of it. Now he was staring at the scene with wide eyes. Before I could yell for him to stay back, the kid did something that still blows my mind. He ran straight for the van. "Hey, stop!" I shouted, but he didn't even hesitate. He ducked under the open van door, grabbed the leg of the guy who was trying to tie the judge's hands, and bit him hard. The man screamed and turned to grab the boy. But the kid was too quick. He darted around, swinging his backpack at the men, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Help! Somebody help! He's being kidnapped!" His screams echoed through the lot, and that's when the panic set in for the kidnappers. One of them slapped the boy hard across the face, but he didn't stop. He grabbed a loose brick from the ground and threw it at the van's window, shattering it. The noise must have scared them because the men suddenly jumped into the van, slammed the door, and sped off, leaving the judge lying on the ground. Dazed and terrified, the boy ran over, untied the judge's hands, and helped him sit up. By the time I snapped out of it and ran over, the kid was kneeling next to the judge, checking if he was okay. "Are you hurt, mister?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. The judge nodded slowly, still too shaken to speak. I called 911, and within minutes, the parking lot was swarming with police. They took statements from me, the judge, and even the boy. Everyone kept praising the kid for his bravery, but he just stood there quietly, rubbing the spot on his cheek where he'd been hit. Then came the part that I'll never forget. As the judge was being loaded into an ambulance to get checked out, he called the boy over. "You saved my life," he said, his voice still shaky. "I don't know how to thank you. Is there anything I can do for you?" The kid hesitated, looking down at his scuffed sneakers. "Can you get my brother out of jail?" he finally asked. Everyone went silent. Even the paramedics paused. The judge blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Your brother?" he asked. The boy nodded. "He didn't do what they said. Mama says it was a mistake, but we can't afford a lawyer. I just want him to come home." The judge stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Tell me his name," he said. "I don't know what happened after that. I only know that a few weeks later, I heard the judge had personally reviewed the boy's brother's case. Turns out the kid was right. His brother had been wrongfully convicted based on weak evidence and sloppy police work. The charges were dropped and he was released. As for the boy, I've seen him a few times around town since then. People treat him like a hero now, but he doesn't seem to care about the attention. I asked him once if he was proud of what he did. All I wanted was to help my brother, he said with a shrug. That's all. I still think about him a lot. In a world that can be so unfair, that kid reminded me of something important sometimes. The smallest acts of courage can make the biggest difference. After the boy's brother was released, I expected things to settle down, but life had other plans. News of the boy's bravery and the judge's actions spread through town like wildfire. The story even made it into the local paper with the headline, "Young Hero Saves Judge, Fights for Justice." Everyone seemed to have an opinion about it. Most people were impressed by the boy. They called him brave, selfless, and wise beyond his years. Others weren't so kind. A few muttered things about how a kid like that probably had some ulterior motive. It made me sick to hear. But it wasn't surprising. Racism runs deep here, and not everyone was ready to give credit where it was due. One day, about a month later, I saw the boy and his brother sitting on the steps of the courthouse. The older brother, Marcus, looked just like the kid, but taller and with a harder edge in his eyes. He had that cautious look of someone who had spent too much time being treated like a criminal. I decided to walk over and say hello. "Hey," I said, giving a small wave. "I don't know if you remember me, but I was there that night. You two doing okay?" The boy, Jamal, looked up and smiled shyly. "We're good. Marcus just had to see his parole officer." "Parole officer?" I asked, confused, but I thought Marcus cut in. His voice flat. They let me go, but not without conditions. Community service, regular check-ins, the whole 9 yards. I didn't even do what they said. But they still make me feel like I'm guilty. Jamal nudged him with his elbow. It's better than being locked up, he said quietly. You're home now. Marcus softened a bit at that. Yeah, I guess. I hesitated, not sure what to say. Finally, I asked, how are people treating you after everything that happened? Jamal shrugged. Some people are nice, some ain't. Mama says that's just how it is. Marcus looked at me directly. People keep acting like my little brother's a hero, and he is, don't get me wrong. But the fact that he had to do all that just to get someone to look at my case? That ain't right. He was right, of course. It wasn't right. A child shouldn't have to risk his life to fix a broken system. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Before I left, I turned to Jamal. Hey, I hope you know what you did wasn't just brave. It was extraordinary. You made a real difference. Jamal looked up at me with those big, serious eyes of his. I didn't do it to be a hero, he said simply. I just did what I had to do. As I walked away, I thought about what he'd said. I just did what I had to do. That boy. He wasn't just brave. He was the kind of person who sees something wrong and steps up, no matter the cost. And even though he didn't say it out loud, I could tell he had a lot of anger in him too, not the destructive kind, but the kind that fuels change. The story didn't end there. Judge Whitaker kept his promise to help Jamal and his family. He started a mentorship program for kids in the neighborhood, offering legal aid and educational resources. Jamal and Marcus were among the first to join, and from what I hear, they're thriving. Every time I see Jamal around town, I think about how much he's done, not just for his brother, but for so many others. People like him don't come around often, and me? I try to be better now. I try to notice the things I used to ignore. Speak up when I'd usually stay quiet. Because if a little boy like Jamal can stand up to kidnappers and fight for justice, the least the rest of us can do is try to make the world a little fairer. One small act of courage, one kid changed everything. Months turned into a year, and Jamal's story never really faded. At least not in our town. The mentorship program Judge Whitaker started became a cornerstone of the community. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it gave kids like Jamal a chance to believe in a system that had failed them so many times before. Jamal's brother Marcus stayed out of trouble. He worked odd jobs, mostly construction and landscaping, and started saving up for school, he told me once. When I ran into him at the grocery store, that he wanted to be a social worker, I figure, he said, tossing a bag of rice into his cart. If I can stop one kid from ending up where I was, it's worth it. Nobody should feel invisible like that, Jamal, though. He was something else. Even as a kid, you could see the fire in him. He'd grown a little taller, filled out some, but he still carried that same quiet intensity. He started coming to the courthouse after school to watch cases, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. When I asked him why, he just shrugged. I want to learn, he said simply. Judge Whitaker took notice, of course. The two of them developed this unlikely friendship. The judge would invite Jamal to his office and let him sift through old case files, teaching him how the law worked. Jamal soaked it all in, asking questions that even stumped the judge sometimes. One day, Jamal came to me with a file in hand. It was an old case about a man who had been convicted of armed robbery years ago. Jamal had found discrepancies in the witness statements and a lack of forensic evidence. Do you think he really did it? He asked me, his eyes searching mine. I didn't know what to say. I'm not sure, Jamal. Why do you ask? He frowned. Because if he didn't, he's still in jail for nothing. That's the kind of kid Jamal was, always thinking about the people the system forgot. Judge Whitaker ended up reopening the case. It took months of digging, but eventually the man was exonerated and released. Jamal didn't say much about it when the news broke. He just smiled a little when people congratulated him and went back to his schoolwork. As time went on, Jamal became a kind of symbol for the town. People started referring to him as the kid who saved the judge. But he never liked the attention. I'm just me, he'd say whenever someone brought it up. He just smiled a little when people congratulated him and went back to his schoolwork. As time went on, Jamal became a kind of symbol for the town. People started referring to him as the kid who saved the judge. But he never liked the attention. I'm just me, he'd say whenever someone brought it up, years later. Jamal went on to study criminal justice at a nearby university. The town rallied behind him, raising money for his tuition through bake sales, charity events, and even donations from local businesses. Judge Whitaker personally wrote him a recommendation letter. By the time Jamal graduated, he had a vision for the future. He wanted to become a civil rights attorney and work to reform the justice system. When he gave his graduation speech, he talked about his brother, about the night in the parking lot, and about how it had changed his life. "I didn't set out to be a hero," he said. "I just wanted to help my family. But that night taught me something important, that sometimes doing what's right isn't about being fearless. It's about being willing to act, even when you're scared." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Marcus was there, tears streaming down his face, clapping harder than anyone now, every so often. When I walk through the courthouse, I see Jamal's name pop up in conversations. People say he's making waves, challenging unjust laws, and fighting for those who don't have a voice. He's still the same kid. Though quiet, determined, and unshakably kind, I like to think that night in the parking lot wasn't just the moment Jamal changed the judge's life. It was the moment he found his purpose, and in a way, it changed all of us too. Years later, Jamal became a name people recognized far beyond our small town. He passed the bar exam on his first try and began working for a nonprofit that focused on overturning wrongful convictions. His cases were tough, often underfunded and uphill battles, but Jamal never wavered. His reputation grew as someone who wouldn't back down, no matter how stacked the odds were. One of his first major cases involved a man named Elijah Carter, who had spent 15 years in prison for a murder he swore he didn't commit. The evidence against Elijah was paper thin, and Jamal knew it. The case was riddled with coerced testimonies and a complete lack of physical proof tying Elijah to the crime. Jamal worked tirelessly, digging through old police reports, interviewing witnesses, and presenting new evidence in court. After months of grueling work, the conviction was overturned, and Elijah walked out of prison a free man. The day Elijah was released, Jamal stood beside him on the courthouse steps. Addressing the crowd of reporters, he didn't gloat or take credit. Instead, he used the moment to highlight the flaws in the system. "This isn't just about one man," Jamal said. "It's about all the people who have been silenced, forgotten, and denied justice. We can do better, and we have to," Judge Whitaker, now retired, watched from the crowd with pride. I spotted Marcus too, standing quietly off to the side, a small smile on his face. One summer evening, years after Jamal had become a well-known civil rights attorney, I saw him again. I was walking through the park, and there he was, sitting on a bench with Marcus and a group of kids. They were laughing and talking, the kids hanging on every word Jamal said. I approached cautiously, not wanting to interrupt, but Jamal spotted me and waved. "Mr. Mark," he called out, grinning. "Jamal," I said, smiling back. "It's good to see you. What are you up to?" He gestured to the kids around him. "Just spending time with the next generation," he said. "Got to make sure they know they can do anything." The kids looked at him with admiration, and I could see why. Jamal wasn't just a lawyer or a community leader, he was hope personified. A living reminder that even in the face of injustice, there's always a way forward. As I sat down to chat with them, one of the kids, a little girl with curly hair and big glasses, asked Jamal a question that made us all pause. "Mr. Jamal," she said, "why do you fight so hard for people?" Jamal thought about it for a moment before answering. "Because someone has to," he said softly. "And because when I was your age, someone gave me a chance to make things right. Now it's my turn to give others that chance." Looking back, I realized Jamal's story isn't just about that one night when he saved a judge. It's about everything that came after, the ripple effects of courage, determination, and kindness. He didn't just change his brother's life or Judge Whitaker's life. He changed mine, he changed the town, and he's still out there changing the world. One case at a time whenever I think about him. I remember something he once said to me. "You don't have to be special to make a difference. You just have to care enough to try." And that's Jamal, just a kid who cared and a man who never stopped.